In the course of normal science, it may happen that anomalies begin to accumulate. Some of these may be set aside for future research. Some may be dismissed as irrelevant. But if a sufficient number of anomalies accumulates, anomalies which resist solution by the paradigm or incorporation into it, a crisis develops. As the crisis intensifies, scientists begin to offer and promote new paradigms capable of accommodating the anomalies. If one of these paradigms attracts the attention of a sufficient number of members of the research community, a scientific revolution takes place. The research community learns to see things in a different way. It develops a new set of methods and concerns. Kuhn points out that unless there is a recognizable crisis provoked by an accumulation of crucial anomalies, there will be no movement to a new paradigm. The first step toward movement to a new paradigm is thus recognition of anomalies, of counter-instances to the current paradigm. A major paradigm shift should have occurred over 50 years ago in New Zealand due to the outstanding revolutionary discoveries of Russell Price and his support teams of New Zealand's leading scientists. But it was not to be as politically aligned factions intervened to permanently withhold the truth from the New Zealand public and the worldwide archaeological research community. Here is the sordid tale of this ongoing censorship. One of the unsung heroes of New Zealand was a surveyor, farmer, amateur archaeologist, Treaton Russell Price, who went more simply by the name of Russell Price. Russell devoted some 25 years, off and on, to very substantial archaeological digs at Poukawa, Hawke's Bay, New Zealand. Here's a picture of Russell down in one of his excavations, showing his trails pointing to an obviously cut piece of wood lying in situ below the tephra ash that was dropped by the 186 AD volcanic explosion of Taupo. This ash is also referred to as pumice, thick layers of which cover large areas of the central volcanic zone of New Zealand's North Island. The dotted line indicates the Taupo tephra layer. Price and his teams, over decades of careful archaeological digging, found undeniable proof of ancient human occupation spanning 7,000 years. This was subsequently verified by C14 carbon dating testing by the DSIR lab, Lower Hutt, Wellington District, as well as comprehensive scientific involvement by leading New Zealand archaeologists, geologists and pedologists. Russell first became involved at Poukawa as a surveyor in the year 1930, responsible for building a canal trench for the outflow drainage of Lake Poukawa. In January 1927, the Department of Lands and Survey were asking for feasibility studies to be carried out, leading to partial drainage of Lake Poukawa. Work got underway in 1930. The canal dug in 1930-31 was to assist the outflow of water from Lake Poukawa, and with 6 feet of freeboard could quickly expel surplus water build-up after torrential rains. A giant dragline excavator was brought in to make the channel cut along the surveying line that Price had marked through the sodden Raupo swampland. Prior to this successful endeavour, there had been frequent flooding of surrounding farmland following torrential rains. The new canal drain at the northern end of the lake was completed in 1931 and enlarged 30 years later in 1961. The partial drainage of the lake brought 3,500 acres of former lakebed land into pasture. This is a typical vintage dragline of circa 1920s, 1930s, creating a drainage channel through wetlands at Kaikokopu Stream, Waihi, Tauranga District. The steam grab dredging machine used on the Poukawa Canal was a Priestman brand, chunky metal parts of which still languish on Bill Butto's farm, where it was abandoned at the end of the job. Here is a picture of the Priestman dredge amidst the tall Raupo papyrus plant of Lake Poukawa's soggy shoreline. The barge upon which the dredge sits is fully obscured by the high Raupo, and a bucket load of lake bottom mud hangs from the derrick boom. At the termination of the 1931 canal excavations, the long boom became the understructure of a bridge on the farm presently owned by David Butto. For the large-scale Poukawa Canal project, the steam grab excavating machine had to sit atop a floating barge that moved forward as the new canal grew in length. Interestingly, in February 1931 there was a massive earthquake in nearby Napier, the epicenter of which was 50 kilometres or 31 miles to the north-northeast. But the Poukawa Valley was, by and large, unaffected, with only minor damage to the developing drainage system. Some brick chimneys on houses at the northern reaches of the lake tumbled, and some farm fences further towards Napier got a few inches out of line. The immediate vicinity of Poukawa Lake saw no serious collateral damage, although there were some slips on the banks of the newly dug canal, and in the swamp portion of the excavations the bottom rose several feet. This relatively minor damage was to be rectified the following summer.
No horizontal movement was recorded on the northeast trending rupture northeast of Poukawa, but at Bridge Pa, a 0.2 metre left lateral displacement of a fence was recorded near the southwestern end of a northeast trending pressure ridge that was upthrown to the southeast. A fence crossing the surface rupture 1 kilometre north was, however, undisplaced. Described a locality southeast of Poukawa railway station. A series of short echelon tears in the turf displaces a fence 8 inches, 0.2 of a metre, horizontally. There is no apparent vertical movement.
As the new canal system excavations proceeded to the base of a hill east-northeast of the lake, a very strange anomaly was revealed. With the dragline cutting its way through the stand of Raupo swamp plant, a section of the mud was found to contain many sets of long leg bones and feet of the now extinct giant moa bird. Surveyor Russell Price found this to be quite mysterious, as he could see no evidence of the other skeletal parts of the stuck-in-the-mud birds. This triggered Surveyor Russell Price's curiosity, followed by a long period of bewilderment, which lingered with him for years thereafter. In this picture we see the skeleton of a giant moa, some species of which stood 12 feet or 3.7 meters high. To the right of the picture is seen a femur leg bone, one of the hundreds of moa bone remains located on the Butto farm at Poukawa, where Russell Price commenced archaeological digs in 1956. This is farmer Bill Butto, who in his formative years and teens, along with his cousins, worked extensively with Russell Price on archaeological digs around the Butto farm. Russell's colleagues also included a dedicated team of adult volunteers and credentialed scientists. Bill stands in front of the canal trench where Russell Price first became aware of multiple leg bones embedded vertically in the mud. In the background are distant hills and valleys where the faint depressions of well-worn moa trackways can be seen to this very day. Russell later recounted to Bill how, in 1930, he leaned on the self-same fence and tried to work out why there were only leg bones, but no signs of the torso, neck, vertebrae and skull of the birds. After much contemplation, he concluded that the culprit behind this anomaly was humans, moa hunters. Over 50 or 60 years ago, the well-worn moa tracks at various points around the valley were very prominent and easily seen, especially in midsummer when the tracks showed up greener than the browner grass to the sides. In this photo, the moa track depression can still be seen, albeit faintly. Whereas cattle tend to make almost horizontal, diagonally circumnavigating tracks down and around steep hillsides, the obviously sure-footed moa birds could walk paths on more inclined angles right down the face. Russell Price was a very practical, logical man who, as a professional surveyor, did his work and drew his charts with meticulous, careful detail. As a farmer for many years beyond 1930-1931, after he had participated in the Poukawa Canal construction scheme, He was a keen observer of animals and noted the way they would move across flat terrain, negotiate hillsides, or circumnavigate obstacles like wetlands. Drawing upon all this combined experience, he returned frequently over the years to look closely at the spot where the solitary moa leg bones had been found. He studied the harder ground contours adjacent and, from this, was able to see the natural pathways the giant moa birds would have followed to the base of the hill. He could readily see where the moa hunters would have secreted themselves in order to burst forth at the precise moment, bellowing to scare the hapless giant birds sideways and down into the soft mud, thus rendering them stuck, immobile and helpless. The hunters would then chop through the legs of the stranded birds and drag the torso up onto the hard ground for plucking, cooking and eating. It was evident that a section of raised land nearby, but sufficiently distant to be inconspicuous to the view of the birds on the trackway, was a moa hunter campsite, complete with cooking pits found in later excavations. As Russell approached retirement, he wanted to devote far more time to trying to answer outstanding questions related to New Zealand's history of human occupation. Maori oral traditions and much other physical evidence would suggest that the country had been inhabited for a very long period before the coming of the Polynesian Melanesian Maori in circa 1300 AD. Many scholarly works by early historians and anthropologists lent credence to this conclusion, and multiple books were available on the library shelves containing oral histories of the learned Maori tohunga, that is, priests, and elders on the subject matter. Seemingly every iwi, that is, Maori tribes, across New Zealand had names, physical descriptions, and histories of their encounters with the earlier inhabitants, and Maori had harboured no reluctance to withhold these oral traditions, recounting many of them openly, often in graphic detail, to genuine inquirers. Like all New Zealanders of his time, Russell Price had access to such works as the 1830s observations of individuals like Joel Samuel Pollock, who wrote Manners and Customs of the New Zealanders, Volumes 1 and 2, or John Macmillan Brown in the 1920s, who wrote Maori and Polynesian, Their Origin, History and Culture. Added to Brown's scholarly works was Peoples and Problems of the Pacific, also in 2 volumes. By 1952, Thor Heyerdahl's massive tome, American Indians in the Pacific, had become available, showing layer upon layer of compelling proof linking the Pacific region's cultural, artifact, flora, and some fauna directly to ancient South America and stemming from a remote antiquity pre-Polynesian epoch. As Russell commenced his digs at Poukawa in 1956, archaeological investigations in New Zealand were at their zenith, and it was an exciting golden age of discovery. This persisted through to the early 1970s, after which time openness gave way to cultural Marxist dabbling, disruption, censorship, and growing interference.
At this meeting, I was nominated as a chairman, along with Mike Jacobs from KLC, and I stood up and informed the meeting that I was a member of the Communist Party of New Zealand. I was a communist, and my role in society was to smash the state system and change society, bring in socialism.
So how did one educated man come to organise such a party?
Initially it was the literature of the Black Panther Party in America that we got attracted to, the work they were doing in America. And when we read these books deeper, we found out that the problems they were complaining about were the exact problems that we were seeing in New Zealand. So we decided to do something constructive and form the Polynesian Panther Party.
You say you used to be gang members. What sort of gangs?
Polynesian gangs.
the ones that were around a couple of years ago.
The very radical social change to New Zealand society was ignited by elements within the Polynesian community of Ponsonby, Auckland, who wished to be comrades in arms with the Black Panther Organisation of the United States. Polynesian immigrants, mainly from Samoa, created the Polynesian Panther Party, but had nothing in common with the struggle of black Americans who had lived under slavery. The Polynesians, therefore, conjured up a Marxist-inspired false history about oppression under British imperialism, which had never happened. Their ranting soon spilled over into the very Marxist workers' unions, who funded propaganda indoctrination trips for Polynesian Panther members to the Soviet Union, Communist China or Cuba, with some members going to Libya for arms training. Within a short time, our accepted, very reliable history books were scrapped under the pretext that they were Eurocentric or ethnocentric and replaced by radical Marxist revisions of regional history. This later spilled over into our institutions of higher learning, and everything got tainted with the Marxist brush, including what was allowed or disallowed to be found in archaeological investigations. None of these problems of 25 years hence raised their ugly head as Russell Price, with expectation, optimism and enthusiasm, commenced his comprehensive assessment of the Poukawa landscape. In the course of the 1930-31 canal excavation, he noted that where the newly cut drainage trench traversed sections of higher ground, it showed two stratifications of undisturbed tephra ash fallouts from massive volcanic explosions in antiquity. These explosions gave very significant and convenient time signatures, as the eruption dates leading to fallout of both of these tephra ash bands were well known. One in circa 186 AD, that is the Taupo ash fall, 1,764 years prior to 1950, and the Waimahia ash fall, circa 3,440 years prior to 1950. Even without the expensive undertaking of carbon dating of organic materials found beneath the ash band stratifications, one could still calculate the approximate date when they came to rest there. If any of the organic matter or artifacts beneath the layers showed signs of human activity in their placement, then that would prove human occupation long before the circa 1300 AD Polynesian-Melanesian epoch. In his 1963 report for the New Zealand Archaeological Association, Russell Price drew this plan of sites 1 and 2 of his exploratory digs. In the upper central region of the plan, he shows a raised hump that shallow, outflowing lake water once meandered around, almost forming an island. Russell referred to the spot as a moa hunter campsite and, during excavations, found a fireplace or cooking oven on the hump, which he called Site 1. This site was far enough away from the moa migratory track that it could not be seen by the passing birds. From this hump, the bones left over from cooked and eaten moa were thrown into the adjacent lake immediately in front of the fire pit, forming a midden. Beyond the humped-up campsite was a wide depression in the ground at the toe of the hill. A little further away on higher ground, the hunters could secrete themselves, ready to spring forth and frighten the passing birds into the muddy bog. Farmer Bill Buddo and myself stand atop the moa hunter campsite hump at Site 1, where birds were cooked and eaten. The farm truck sits in the depression adjacent to the base of the hill, where the moa hunters lay in wait for the birds passing along the track. The lighter or sunnier high ground in the middle section of the picture shows where birds crossed the valley floor from the range of hills on the skyline. This is the approximate vantage point on elevated ground where Price concluded the moa hunters would have secreted themselves for scaring passing birds on the track down into the bog. The moa tracks, still visible in the 1950s, 1960s, would have followed substantially firm ground and crossover points of the lake outflow, whereas this bog location served the repetitive purpose of trapping the startled and panicked birds very effectively, as evidenced by the number of huge leg bones in situ. On Russell Price's drawn map, he shows yet another fire pit at Site 2, not far removed from Site 1, where birds were also cooked and eaten. Here's a picture of the Poukawa Lake drainage canal, with the lake shown in the background. Arrows point to the significant spots along the ancient moa track where the giant birds were captured, killed, cooked and eaten. Although no moa bones or those of other birds were to be found in the fire pits, such fragments were found as castaway debris in front of the fire pits, which were undoubtedly given a good clean-out before frequent reuse. It wasn't too long before Russell's very intriguing archaeological finds caught the attention of local and regional newspapers, and the dates of human occupation for New Zealand continued to be set at earlier and earlier epochs. The lozenge-shaped hill fort shown orientates onto the 4 primary points of the compass, with corners pointing to north, south, east and west. The due north point orientates onto purpose-placed limestone boulders situated on a high ridgeline 2 1/3 miles away. Sites 1 and 2 both had fire pits for cooking. When Price commenced his first digs on Site 1, he was probably unaware of the fact that he would one day have access to the carbon dating technologies of the DSIR laboratory near Wellington. In lieu of such advanced scientific technologies being placed at his disposal, he had the tephra ash bands from volcanic explosions bracketing artifacts found into decipherable time capsules. He quickly conceived of a modus operandi that focused on the ancient ash showers that had occurred over a millennium or several millenniums before Maori found these shores. Before commencing his formal digs, Price had a talk with a local Maori elder and laid out a strategy or approach to archaeological investigations. He would excavate down to the top of the 186 AD ash band layer and carefully clear it of all humus and debris. Anything previously found in the humus or peat and ash mix of the layers above the 186 AD pumice would be considered to contain potential residues from the Maori epoch of habitation. Price would then carefully inspect the ash band layer surface from the 186 AD fallout and ascertain that it was undisturbed with no fissures or evidence of foreign content. It had to be purely airborne ash, composed of the grittier or heavier particles at the bottom of the band, reducing to talcum powder-like material at the upper surface. Once the sealed integrity of the ash band was known and approved, he could excavate down through it with the firm conviction that any cooked and broken up moa bones found, bearing the cut marks of obsidian knives, etc., as well as any other man-made or utilised artefacts, had been deposited there and lain in situ from before the volcanic explosion of Taupo in circa 186 AD. As Dr. Richard Holdaway stated in 1996 after falling foul with his peers for his heresy in finding Kiori rat bones beneath Taupo tephra ash,
most archaeologists have never actually excavated through 2 feet of ash. It seals everything underneath it. You can see every last wormhole in it, and you can see where there is damage to it. So if something is underneath, you know it was there before the ash fell.
Holdaway's discovery that the Kiori rat had been in New Zealand for at least 1100 years before Maori arrived in 1300 AD was a most unwelcome find, as the little critter is a real landlubber that hates water and could only have arrived with humans. Price wrote the following in his 1963 report for the New Zealand Archaeological Association. In consideration of Price's 1963 report, let's explore the significance of these layers and the positions of man-made or human-utilised objects above, within or below them. This is but one of the many cross-section scale drawings completed by Treaton Russell Price during the 25 years or so that he devoted to multiple careful digs at the Poukawa sites. As investigations continued, it was found that many cooked moa bones, often broken into short lengths, presumably for the purpose of sucking out the marrow, lay beneath the undisturbed ash band of 186 AD. It was further ascertained that many of these cooked broken up bones had cutting tool score marks on them and lay beneath the undisturbed Waimahia ash band of circa 1340 BC. The same held true of human-made or modified artefacts in wood, bone, stone or shell. Despite clear evidence of ancient pre-Maori occupation, Price remained reticent in not expounding his views too openly, pending a greater accumulation of data. Note how Price has numbered the layers in this scaled cross-section. So, to recap the meaning of the numbers, Price wrote,
It was noted on profiles exposed by drainage that two pumice bands were present, the shallowest being coarse pumice and pellets, some of considerable size. The deeper band was composed of a fine white pumice and, in extreme cases, was 10 inches thick. This latter band, it is considered, reached the lake in a pumice flood some 10 years after the Taupo eruption 1,760 years ago.
In the 1950s and 1960s, Alan Puller, seen here on the left, and Colin Vucetich both worked for the DSIR Soil Bureau, mapping soils in the North Island. Vucetich worked around Rotorua and Puller in Gisborne and Wakatani. They recognised that the soils were formed on volcanic ash layers, which were often visible in road cuttings. The men started tracing out distinctive ash layers across the region. Work on ash layers was later called tephrostratigraphy and was initially outside official Soil Bureau policy as a means of establishing artefact age, as it was still a developing science. Much of their work was therefore done in weekends and holidays on what they called secret correlation missions. Between 1963 and 1975, Vucetich and Puller published a series of papers on the sequence and characteristics of the main volcanic eruptions in the Taupo and Rotorua region. This work has been the foundation for later volcanological studies, as well as the understanding of soil properties. In this picture, Colin Vucetich has labelled the various ash layers by date. He has the Taupo explosion listed as occurring 1800 years prior, the Waimahia explosion listed as 3440 years prior, or 1440 BC, and the Wakatani explosion occurring 5,200 years ago, or 3250 BC. Russell Price in the upper left and a colleague are seen at the most major dig site, which sat adjacent to Lake Poukawa at Site 4. Price had become aware of Puller's and Vucetich's pioneering research into tephrostratigraphy and the very significant role it could play in his archaeological investigations at Poukawa. Tephrostratigraphy, considered by the Soil Bureau as something of a pioneering science in the 1950s and 60s, quickly graduated to full respectability and acceptance. Within New Zealand, which has been very actively volcanic in certain areas and ages, the science now constitutes a major tool for dating geological strata or events. Again, a photo from one of the Poukawa archaeological excavations showing the distribution of ash band layers. Any cooked and broken moa bones or other man-made artefacts found beneath the Taupo ash band predated the Polynesian Maori epoch by 1100 years, or beneath the Waimahia explosion by over 2100 years, and Wakatani explosion by over 4,500 years. This map of New Zealand's North Island shows the volcanic belt, a section of the worldwide Ring of Fire extending through the central region. These volcanoes, several of which are dormant and others active, periodically erupt and sometimes in the past with extreme violence. The red dot marks the position of Poukawa in relation to the central volcanic plateau. The Waimea volcanic explosion came from a vent or vents within present-day Lake Taupo, preceding the later violent Taupo eruption by about 1,526 years. Having found conclusive evidence of human occupation at Poukawa, going back to well before the 186 AD explosion of Taupo, Price moved his investigations 300 feet west-northwest to another likely spot on the elevated spur and found yet another fire pit there as well. Russell Price writes, so, in summary of these two digs, Price now had undeniable proof of human habitation in New Zealand, antecedent to 186 AD, or 1100 years before the arrival of the Polynesian Maori. He recorded the following in his field book. Here is a handwritten record by Price concerning the Site 1 and 2 digs and the involvement of the DSIR in dating the results. He mentions,
as we have recovered broken up moa remains with one femur carrying deep saw cuts, undoubtedly the work of man, 8 clear inches below the level of the dated moa remains. These latter broken bones were embedded in subsoil not far from the giant bones. It will be seen how necessary it is to obtain expert assistance from the DSIR.
Site 3. Russell Price, never doing anything by halves, had excavated 2 sites to show that both were locations for cooking, eating, then discarding meal residues into the waters in front of the Moa Hunter fire pits. However, he'd initially found a site where the method employed for capturing the giant birds was to panic and stampede them off the walking track and down into a bog, where they became stuck fast and had no chance of escape. Could it possibly be that there were other bog areas of the local terrain where the same hunt and capture method was being employed? Russell searched the farm, and by looking carefully at the contours of land fed by streams, finally decided upon a second likely area where there may be disembodied sawn-off leg bones standing vertically in the subsurface mud. Russell decided that this location, at the base of a farm hill and near a stream bed, had the essential attributes for ancient hunters to herd moa birds down into a bog from which there was no escape. The position where he undertook his dig, to ascertain this fact, approximates where sheep are clustered together near a fence line. Russell Price and his colleagues, including young William Buddo, were very successful in finding many more solitary, vertically standing moa legs at this location and simply left them in situ where they remain to this day. Here's what Russell Price handwrote in one small section of his 3 exercise books used in the field, in this case relative to excavations at Site 3. This is but a small sample copied from Price's record of bird bones from mostly long extinct species that were recovered from Site 3. The list goes on almost interminably, and demonstrates an obsessive-compulsive need to record every find, as well as clues that find might hold, relative to human activity from remote antiquity. Again, a sample of a 2-page spread within one of his exercise books. Similar books listed the artifacts made from bone, wood or stone as tools or ornaments, including some worked greenstone. It is quite certain that many cooked obsidian knife-scratched bones or other human-fashioned objects came from beneath the Taupo, Waimahia or Wakatani ash bands, thus dating the items to between 1100 years to 4500 years before the Polynesian Maori found New Zealand shores. As stated, Russell Price probably didn't anticipate that he'd eventually have access to Dr. Thomas Athol Rafter's radiocarbon dating laboratory at the DSIR. However, the outstanding finds at Poukawa gained the attention of the DSIR scientists, and C14 analysis was undertaken by them in the middle to late 1960s and early 70s. In the above results, moa bones that had been sawn into by man returned C14 dates of 2300 years, plus or minus 60 years, before 1950. Other cooked and broken up moa bones returned dates of 3120 years, plus or minus 40 years, before 1950. Human-handled bones or artifacts, tool-marked and found beneath the Waimahia ash band, returned dates of 3,440 years before 1950 and had mineralized due to their great age. Site 4. After several years of conducting digs at smaller, more confined sites, Russell Price moved to a raised peninsula-like strip of land that jutted partially into Lake Poukawa itself. Here he would undertake a very comprehensive set of digs over the next few years into the 1970s and make many remarkable finds. As usual, a datum line was established, and strings were set out crossing pegs at 90-degree intersections, thus grid referencing squares into measured, numbered plots. The intention was to dig each second square, while leaving an adjacent balk wall undisturbed for future archaeologists to verify the results arrived at by Russell and his team. Here is a map showing 2 digs in the general vicinity of Site 4. The grid shown at the bottom left is where the very substantial final dig took place. However, other work was undertaken adjacent to Farmer David Burrow's hay shed, drawn at the top of the map. A successful dig was completed at this site, and the depression where the large circle excavation took place is still evident on the summit of the low hillock. Here's a brief description of the fireplace site adjacent to David Burrow's hay shed. Some shallow surface ploughing on the hillock had been done 18 months prior to cultivate grass, and 2.5 pounds of broken moa bones as well as oven stones had been churned up and exposed in the process. However, these lay beyond the circular 35 wide confines of the much deeper archaeological excavation. As a professional surveyor, Russell could lay out a site with meticulous precision, but was forever cognizant of the fact that he was regarded as an amateur archaeologist. He therefore had to conduct his digs by the book, so to speak, to avoid any further criticism of his methodology or approach. At the same time, he constantly consulted or involved credentialed professionals of several disciplines: archaeologists, geologists, tephrostratigraphy, volcanologist experts, or the DSIR carbon dating laboratory. His work and results were under constant scrutiny by seasoned professionals who took a keen interest in the unfolding, startling revelations it produced. Leading New Zealand scientist W.A. Puller wrote, Puller remained guarded in his commentary, possibly sensing a firestorm that might ensue. He, along with other scientists, was later a signatory to a statement of belief in support of Price's conclusions. This document was not for public release, although important snippets of it have been released into the public arena by those who hold copies. Site 4 is where the most major archaeological digs took place, spanning several years of endeavour. It is a raised ground peninsula hump jutting into the eastern floodplain shallows of the lake and was an ideal living or camping location for ancient hunters of moa, or the teeming species of waterfowl, hierodella, freshwater shellfish, eels, fish and crayfish shrimp. As archaeological investigations began by Price and his team, this site was officially registered as N141-12 by the New Zealand Archaeological Association, and carbon dating results fall under the numbered category of R2476. Here's the heavily rutted and rumpled surface of Site 4, dotted with holes and lengthy depressions after half a century of abandonment. It is on the farm of Mr. David Buddo. Price and his colleagues filled in the excavations at the termination of work in order to preserve the features, but multiple scars remain these 50 years on. This is immediately above Site 4, showing its proximity to the lake waters and central island. Concerning this strip of raised land, at the northern end of the lake, Price wrote,
situated on a low ridge roughly quarter mile north of the present Poukawa Lake, and is easily relocated as our grid covers the whole ridge for 140 yards north from the present boundary fence between Mr. Buddo and the Maori landowners who control about 1,300 acres of the old lake bed and the lake itself. We have been working this site for the past 12 months and expect to finish this year, when the worked area will be soon down in good grass. The balk lines will be left in and clearly marked. As far as I can see, the site should be free from possible damage as the evidence is depleted and clear of any further ploughing.
Te Papa Museum in Wellington holds 21,714 bird bone and fossil vertebrae artefacts from the archaeological digs of Treaton Russell Price and his team at Poukawa. On the 23rd of January 1967, Russell Price wrote in the above report,
The site has been set out in 10-foot squares, with a foot-wide balk left in between each square. Each square has been trowelled, and great care has been taken to see that all material recovered has been recorded in all the various layers for each square. 3 books for records are in constant use together, with a grid plan and location plan. Photos and slides are available, and a carefully drawn cross-section illustrating all the various layers encountered in the excavation will be sent with the artefacts when site is finished.
Here's a sample of a 2-page spread from the Bone Book. Other large field books listed artefacts found. Here's a part of a cross-section profile drawing Russell Price did at NZAA site number N141-1. The site is divided by vertical lines into 3 sections. On the left, the stream bank. In the middle section, declining towards the stream bed, and on the right, the stream bed. To the left of the picture, Price labels the layers as friable topsoil, fine peat, some pumice, taupo pumice, peat mixed, fine white pumice, peat, matai seeds, wood, cracked peat below which is the water table. At the bottom of the picture, Price writes a series of captions with arrows. From the left is 10 broken, 6 unbroken, extinct bird bones in bag 39. Further towards the middle, the arrowed caption reads 10 broken, 8 unbroken, extinct bird bones, bag 40. He also depicts Hierodella shells just below the fine white pumice layer. The next arrowed section to the right reads near bones 25B, broken moa bones, bag 41. Price lists his vertical scale as 1/8 inch equals 1 inch. His horizontal scale is 1 inch equals 1 foot. These are some of the many artifacts fabricated or used for a wide range of human endeavours: hunting, sewing, scraping, pounding, sharpening, cutting, grinding, drilling, or simply as ornamentation. These were located at the several dig sites across the Poukawa Valley. With a large number of these artifacts or objects associated directly to humans having been found beneath the Taupo, Waimahia and Wakatane ash bands, there is conclusive proof of a human presence at Poukawa spanning over 7,100 years. Similar ancient serrated edge barbs, needles and boring tools from the South Island of New Zealand, home to many of the pre-Maori moa hunter tribes that had flourished in New Zealand since remote antiquity. These items are in a private collection.